Hey, Angel Mahar here. Loving a borderline, person with borderline personality disorder. Whether you're experiencing those patterns and they haven't been diagnosed yet, or they won't go to get diagnosed, or they've been diagnosed, anybody in any relationship type in your life. We talk a lot here about significant other relationships. But can you make a borderline happy? Can you make a person with BPD happy? Well, and can you do that without sacrificing yourself? Or is that just codependent denial right from the get-go? That you somehow can take responsibility for their emotions and that you can somehow help them to be happy. So the thing is, no. People can't make people with BPD happy. So all people with BPD are not the same. It's important to remember that, right? And so some people with BPD, and I'm talking untreated, or not really significantly treated, which is kind of like a weird measurement of vagueness. Sorry about that, but everybody's different. Usually they're not very happy people because they're in a lot of pain. And that's internalized, and they're trying to externalize that out. And then they get triggered by things in the here and now that go back to the past, and they don't realize that because those are the borderline unconscious repetition compulsion cycles of reenacting what happened often, more often than not, or what was even perceived for some in childhood. So these automatic sort of protective defense mechanisms that help people survive their childhoods with BPD one way or the other, whether it was actual abandonment or perceived abandonment, and then when they get to adulthood, early adulthood, maybe mid-teens to early adulthood, all those defense mechanisms that help them survive a family of origin that was, in more cases than not, for people who go on to have the patterns of or get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, they had to survive something. They had to get through something that wasn't really helping them to know themselves. They didn't get through the early stages of childhood development without emotional rest. So arrested development before by the age of 2. So how could you possibly make that person in your life, be it your mother, an adult child, a partner, an ex, maybe on and off again, you're not sure what's going on, person with BPD in a significant other relationship, whether male or female, can you make them happy? Can you help them to be happy? Well, many people with codependency think the answer is yes, I can. I can work hard enough. I have so much to give. I'm such a happy person, which people with codependency can be happy people, but they're not aware of what's going on deeper in their emotional landscape where there is pain from family of origin and childhood, or people wouldn't have codependency. Because again, I'd like to remind you, codependency, the idea isn't let's do this together, right? People need to be individuated individuals. And so codependency is not what the 12 steps, I don't believe in the 12 steps for codependency because they're co-opted from Alcoholics Anonymous. And codependency is a mental health issue. And it missed being in the DSM as a personality disorder by like about that much. So the point is, I'm not here to pathologize codependency or to blame people with codependency for what the person with BPD does. Not at all. But this interrelational dynamic of people with codependency who might or might not be aware of it yet, reenacting out your repetition compulsions from childhood, where you might have been parentified or infantilized, or just had a parent that wasn't emotionally available, or you could have had a cluster B parent. All of these different things that can hurt children as they're growing up. And people with codependency have really adverse experience. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what was it because it's not that capital T word necessarily. But and it usually happens a little bit later in childhood than the really primal core woundedness of what creates and causes borderline personality disorder, or between the age of 3 and 5, narcissistic personality disorder. And people with codependency are not narcissistic. I want to make that clear. So you're trying to give, to fix, to rescue, to help that person with BPD, or maybe you were. And so the thing is, how can you possibly think, and people do believe this, and I mean no judgment with this, right? I compassionately say, How could you possibly think that you could make another person happy when you don't have control over another person? But people with codependency learn in their childhood, like if mom is having some issues or not emotionally available, or mom and dad are fighting and mom's hurting, just as an example, then a 6-year-old might be like really worried about mom's feelings, because if mom's not okay, how can the 6-year-old child be okay? So these patterns repeat for people with codependency, and patterns repeat for people with counterdependency as well. So the thing is, why can't you make or keep or get that borderline, the person with BPD, back to a happy place? Because in the beginning, everything is so wonderful. And not everybody with BPD is the same. So some people with BPD may really be kind of jovial in general in a way that isn't really authentic, but they may be like, they may laugh at jokes, they may like comedy movies or shows, that kind of thing. But are they really happy inside? No. And that's because of a lost self, unstable sense of self. So then they're always looking, as I've said in many other videos, they're always looking for their own identity through you in a relationship of any relationship type. You can't be them for them when you need to be you for you. So this idea that you can be loving a borderline and make them happy, no, you really can't. Now, can it seem like sometimes you have? Sure. But is that really you making them happy? Or is that maybe in moments where some people with BP, depending where they are, male or female, if they can take something a little bit in at a certain point, it's certainly not going to last. And the other thing about people with BPD, especially untreated and until significantly treated, that people need to understand is that happiness is threatening to them. Happiness is uncomfortable because a lot of them didn't really know it in childhood. Oh, they might have had some happy moments here and there, but when people with BPD who are largely often very negative, very distrustful, very suspicious, and that those types of things, which comes from childhood, and not knowing who they are, not being able to trust themselves, so they can't trust you. They don't know themselves, they don't see themselves, so they can't really see and hear you. You're going to try to make them happy. And when they're not happy, you think it's your fault that they're not happy, especially for people with codependency, but it could be for people with counterdependency as well. You can't really make them happy because there's so much working against why they're very unhappy people, by and large, more of the time than not, if not entirely in the case of many with borderline personality disorder. So is it denial for a codependent to believe that you can make this person in your life or who was in your life happy? Yes, it is. But that goes back to family of origin and something that you're repeating a pattern of yourself, right? So, and people are always trying to get a person with BPD from that devaluation or micro splits of devaluation, whatever the degree is, to, hey, come on, like, let's do this, let's do that, like, trying to get them out of where they're at emotionally. And you can't do it because you can only take care of your own emotions, which a lot of people with codependency or counterdependency don't know how to do actually. Unless you get into that healing recovery process, I'm out here to work with you. If you are codependent or counterdependent, and whether you're still with that person with BPD or not, or whether it's been a breakup, or whether you've had other breakups in the past and now you're trying again with somebody, you're not sure, maybe they have BPD or NPD, you don't know what's going on. Or maybe it's another codependent, because I was recently asked a question on a video I did, I don't know when, like which video, but can two codependents who are both exes of people with BPD have a healthy relationship? No. No. Why? Because codependents need to realize, as do counterdependents, that you need to realize it's a mental health challenge and that it comes from woundedness in childhood. So you haven't individuated. And you might have a great career and you might have a lot of friends. You might be doing really well in your life in so many ways, but relationally is where people see this happening in their lives. And then they think, well, sort of like how you might have tried to rescue a parent or tend to their feelings so they would be okay so you could feel safe as a child, which you wouldn't have understood or known consciously you were doing that. You just can't take control or responsibility for a person with BPD and how they feel. and they're going to feel how they feel, and unfortunately they're going to act that out how they acted out or acted in. There isn't anything you can do to change that. So you can't make a person with BPD happy, and you might think that you do sometimes, but you don't know what's going on internally. And when I work with clients, I can explain that part from the inside out, right? From my past many, many moons ago. But the point is, people with BPD largely have a negative view of everything because they are shame-based and very much fear-based. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, rejection sensitivity. It's like a Geiger counter out there. And it doesn't take but one half of a little thing, and they're off into like, well, you never loved me, and you didn't. You're trying to make them happy. Maybe, it's a special occasion and you've given them roses, or you've given them, chocolate, or if it's a male, you've given them whatever they wanted for their birthday, or, whatever. And the thing is, they might like something about that, but it's not going to be a lasting, happy kind of moment. This is the other reason I'm always saying people with BPD untreated cannot love you. They do not see you, they do not hear you, because they don't know who they are, and they're looking for identity through you, and they don't know the difference between self and other. Keep that in mind. So you can't make them happy, and you can't keep them happy if they get a little happy. But for people with BPD, especially when they've gone through a lot of difficulty and adverse experience in their childhoods, as over 80% of people with BPD have, well, they're constantly reliving that. They're living it internally in an unconscious way. They're not consciously aware of it unless they go to treatment. And so you're trying to make happen something in the here and now, when often, your best effort is going to somehow, they're going to be triggered by it. It's not your responsibility that they're triggered. And the next thing you know, something blows up or something happens and you're like, what just happened here? Because nothing happened here. And that's because nothing happened in the here and now, right there between you and that person with BPD. But for them, and unknowingly unconscious, in their unconscious, they've just been triggered by something, and it's not your responsibility, but it's inside of them. And then they're going to externalize it out onto you because you're closest. They're going to think you made them feel anxious or angry, or like you're about to abandon them, or rejection sensitivity. So people with BPD untreated are very negative. Their experience has been very negative and very painful. So even if they're trying to work on that or overcome that, I mean, they need the whole kind of gamut of treatment, and it takes, as Dr. John Gunderson says, 8 to 16 years for BPD recovery, and that's if people engage that process and in different modalities. So DBT, getting them into DBT, well, they have to want to engage it. They need to want to have to do these things for themselves. And people with codependency have this need to externalize out care, maybe overgiving, and also control. Because you learned in childhood, I'm not saying it's conscious that you're trying to control them, but you've learned in childhood that you need to be the one that achieves, that does, to get seen, to get heard, to be validated, to feel real, to feel important, to feel like you matter at all with a parent. And so then you repeat this pattern with the person with BPD. They can't love you. They can't take it in. They don't see you, and they don't hear you, and you can't change their mood states. Maybe sometimes you can have a little bit of an effect, but you don't know where they still are internally. So you can't make a person with BPD happy, and you certainly can't sustain that. They can't sustain happiness and what's going on for them internally. So, and the other thing is, the 12 Steps of Codependence Anonymous are not going to help you with this. If you relate to what I'm saying here, because you've been in a relationship with someone with BPD, or you have a mother or other relationship type with BPD, and you're trying, and or a partner or an ex, and you're trying to like keep all those balls up in the air, so that maybe you can get back together with the ex, maybe you can like still relate to your mother, maybe your sister, your brother, whatever. The bottom line is, what you need to do is get into a healing recovery journey. I'm out here to help you work on that, to be able to heal the codependency from the family of origin and the childhood woundedness, because codependency is a mental health challenge, okay? You need to work on that to go from being codependent to become independent. And codependency, in the lens that it's seen today, is not the codependency that was where people went to the 12 steps of Codependence Anonymous. That is to cheat yourself out of a deeper healing and recovery process for sure. And so I've been working with clients in this area for 32 years, helping them to process, helping them to go from being codependent, heal and recover from the breakup, or having to go into contact from a family member or someone else in your life, or a parent if they're the ones who have BPD or NPD, or it might be more than one person in your life. So you can't take responsibility for their feelings. You can't make a borderline happy. You can't keep them happy if they're a little bit happy. You need to learn how to take care of yourself, and you need to learn that you can't take responsibility for other people's feelings, because when you're doing that as a codependent, or even counterdependents get into things in a different way, then you're in denial because you're setting yourself aside, you're abandoning yourself to try to do something for the person with BPD. So you want to externalize out your discomfort and get your needs met, not in a conscious way, but you're going to externalize out something to try to change how somebody else feels so you can feel better. That's not the way to go about it. You need to get into that healing and recovery journey so that you can have a healthy and functional relationship to and with yourself, first and foremostly. And people with BPD are threatened by happiness. They're threatened by positivity. They're threatened by love. They're threatened by being liked because they're not used to it. So maybe everybody isn't exactly the same with BPD, but the overriding patterns within BPD, with that lack of self, that negative experience in childhood, perceived or actual abandonment, the fear of it, the rejection sensitivity, all kinds of other moving pieces about what BPD really is and means, they don't know how to connect. They don't know in any lasting way how to attach. They do not see you. They do not hear you for who you are. And so you keep working hard to, like, in this case, loving a borderline, trying to make them happy. Can't do it. And even if they get happy once in a while, that's you exerting, not only you're acting out of denial, but you're exerting too much effort to take care of their feelings. What about you? Because there's broken mutuality in these relationships. What you give, you don't get back. And what you give takes away from self. And then after these relationships break up, whatever the relationship type, people with codependency or counterdependency are often, but like, if I only did this, if I only said that, if I only didn't do this, if I only did say, or did it, all of that stuff is irrelevant, believe it or not, because you can't take responsibility for somebody else's feelings. You can't take responsibility for somebody else, let alone somebody with borderline personality disorder, getting into treatment, or whether they do or they don't. You can't make a relationship that already isn't working, that's falling apart, or that's ruptured, or maybe ruptured over and over again, or you're in the limbo place. You can't make that work. Though you may believe you can, and that is the counterdependent or the codependent denial. And it is still a repetition compulsion of reenacting in a codependent or counterdependent way what you went through in your family of origin. So I'm out here to help people to figure that part out and understand that better if it resonates with you. And it is a deep healing and a process of learning more and examining your family of origin and your childhood in ways that will really come together with a lot of other work and things that we do to help you process and figure out what happened, understand it enough to change it. And where does that change occur? It doesn't occur by reaching out to help somebody else and denying yourself and abandoning yourself. It happens when you get into your own internal emotional landscape. That's where lasting change happens. And codependency is not a life sentence. Neither is borderline personality disorder. For those who go and seek treatment and stick with it, people can heal and recover. And so can people with codependency go from codependent, or people with counterdependency go from counter-dependent to independent. Don't sell yourself short. Just know that it might mean, for sure, for many people, for more than not, that the relationship that you might be really invested in right now, or still reeling from, is not going to work. But that's a radical acceptance of that, and getting into your own healing and recovery process is crucial. So you can't make a borderline happy. They have a lot of issues with being happy, feeling okay, loss of self, not no ability to trust other, not knowing the difference between self and other. And while you're trying to make them happy, they're trying to seek identity through you. It's just a mess, unfortunately, and it doesn't help anybody. And so codependent denial pushes that, as do the patterns that you learned in childhood. So if I resonate with you, I'm out here to help you today to break those patterns and to heal from the BPD relationship breakup and to find yourself and to really know yourself for the first time in an integrated way, and to be able to go from codependency or counterdependency to independent. And that's the way then to go forward to have healthy relationships. So I hope that was helpful. And if you're trying to make a borderline happy, it's really futile. It really is. It's going to hurt you more in the long run, over and over and over. And it is codependent or counter-dependent denial. And you can't take responsibility for how they feel. You can't change how they feel so that you can feel better, and or you think you can make the relationship work. So you deserve more than that today. And it can be a very painful place to be in. But what's one of the greatest lessons from these relationships? Getting into that healing and recovery process and learning the greatest lesson, which is how to heal the wounded inner child and actually self-integrate with that part of self and become independent and go forward in a much more emotionally healthy way. So there's no rescuing, saving, fixing, or making the borderline happy. That's all about codependent or counterdependent denial.